Start now. All right. Welcome, 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 everyone. We are letting in some people that are coming in just now. My name is Saul K, and I'm super excited and grateful to have part two in this series of the real history of Israel. And really, the purpose of this series is to provide a better history of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I can attest today in my Middle Eastern language cultures class of the modern Middle East at UC Berkeley. Spent about 8 minutes on describing Judaism and 2 days on Islam. And I think there's nothing wrong with Islam, but things are just like slightly out of balance in terms of the amount of information that's being presented. So I want to make sure people get a better history of the creation of the state of Israel. And also, I want to give parents and students better resources for dealing with anti Semitism that's happening on and off campus. And specifically tonight, I'm going to have a bit of a different slant on things. Rabbi Gil Leeds is the Chabad on campus rabbi and also did my son's bris, so I trust him. Known him for a long time, and he's been working on campus for quite some time and has been doing a series on the 1967 war from JLI, Jewish Learning Institute. And so he's going to condense some of that knowledge on the 1967 war, combining that with the Hasidic response to anti-Semitism. And I know a lot of people are going to watch this replay because a lot of people are busy and stuff, so that's fine. But I want to go ahead and turn it over to Rabbi Gil. I know you have a lot of content to share, and I want to first of all thank you so much, honor you and your time, and you can take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you for having me. So, I want to begin. I don't have tremendous technical skills, so hopefully I haven't done Zoom teaching since the COVID year when Cal went online. But
I made you
let me
host
see
if
if
you
I can
want
share my
to.
PowerPoint. Do I have admin?
Yeah, you should be fine.
Okay, so I gotta do. How do I do the share screen? Um, Share screen. Let's go to that. Do you see it? You see
Yes.
my,
Yes, I see it.
let's see. Oh, I don't see. What do you see? Do you see the full screen of it or no?
No, I see the PowerPoint. Hold on.
The land in the spirit?
There you
You see
go.
this?
Yep.
Okay. So basically, this is a class that we teach on campus for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Um, it was made in connection with the um, the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. And we look at Israel through the lens of the Six-Day War. And in this class, we're basically looking at the Jewish claim to the land of Israel, which is very central, I think, to this whole conflict. I mean, this is the elephant in the room, if you will. And 1967, we talk a lot about going back to the 1967 borders, talk about, if Israel would only retreat to the 1967 borders, then there'd be peace. But what was happening in 1967 when Israel was at the 1967 borders that brought about the 1967 war? And we got to go there to understand what the problem is today, because if there was war then and there's war today, perhaps the war today is still a result of some of the underlying causes that led to the Six-Day War. And that helps us understand and gives us a lot of clarity into how we should be approaching things on campus. And what I'm going to share tonight, I think, when I first started teaching this, it wasn't as popular of a view, I'd say, um, the claim to the land, I guess, punchline that I'll be sharing towards the end, which is the Torah perspective. Like, what is the think Jewish perspective? We're going to go through different elements of the different claims that are brought, throughout that you might have heard in things called hasbara, like explanations of how to understand what's going on in the land and how to explain it to people that don't understand the situation. But this claim, I think today is coming back in, not only back into fashion, but it's the only argument that's actually defensible. And so let's get started. Um, so we're going to talk about three three ideas here. What place does Israel hold in Jewish life? That's the first thing we're going to say, just so we have a little bit of a context. Then we're going to talk about why do Jews even need a homeland? Who says that the Jewish people need a homeland? Why does a people need a land to begin with? And what claim do Jews have to the land of Israel? And that's kind of like the crux of it all. So let's get started. Some of the things that we know, just to fast forward, Saul is involved in a lot of these as a as a as a musician in life cycle events. You have the glass broken at a wedding. That's like the climax of the wedding. We break the glass and yell Mazel Tov. And what are we doing? We're remembering the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, where we had our sovereign Jewish statehood for several hundred years, and twice we had it, and now we're 2,000 years since that, and we break a glass even at our height of our joy to remember that the temple is not yet standing, and that our own joy is incomplete until it is rebuilt. And so we talk about Jerusalem at the happiness of the wedding. We talk about Israel and Jerusalem at the time of mourning. These chairs are for people that are in mourning. They sit down, and mourners are comforted by their guests. And the traditional saying is, God should comfort you among the mourners of Zion, which is Israel and Jerusalem. And so we mentioned that in the comfort. In saying, what's the comfort of that? We say, just as we know that the Jewish people will eventually return to Israel once again, and there will be peace in the world. We know that so too the soul of the departed will return to the world and also be reunited with their loved ones. We also talk about it in the Passover Seder. That's the most celebrated Jewish holiday. We have the Shana Haba Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem. We always end the Seder with that this year we're slaves, next year we'll be in Jerusalem, symbolically speaking, that we are going to be brought into the promised land once again. We also have throughout the ages aliyah to Israel. It wasn't just a modern term. This is something that was happening for throughout all the years. There was a constant presence of Jews in the land of Israel, but many came pre-state Israel and beyond. My own grandmother was migrated there from at that time she was born in Hungary, Czechoslovakia area in 1934. She immigrated to then Palestine, so she was essentially Palestinian. And there were Jews living there for many, many generations, but there were different waves of Aliyah in different times. Jews from uh, from the former Soviet Union, Jews from Yemen, Morocco, different places, different parts of the world where Jews were kind of creating this ingathering, coming back to Israel. Um, Many great sages throughout our history were buried there, like Maimonides, who lived in the 1200s. He was a great philosopher, physician, and Jewish codifier. Was was buried after he passed away in Cairo, Egypt. He was taken to be buried in the town of Tiberias, and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, a poet and a scholar. He also was buried there. There's many special sites in Israel that are special because those are sites of burial places of great sages throughout all the centuries. And they say a joke that more Jews immigrate to Israel horizontally than vertically, but sometimes people want to be buried there in the Holy Land. But this is a critical space that this Rabbi Yehuda Halevi said, my heart is in the East. He said, even though he was living in the West in Spain, his heart was in the East. Now, I want to share, if I can figure out how to do the stop share for a second, a video that's going to introduce um, the Six-Day War to us so we can understand it. It's going to be some black and white footage. It's really incredible to see. And it gives us the picture of what transpired there in the days leading up to the war and where we are because of it. So let me just stop the video for this share for a second and try to share a new screen. And let's see. Do you see the video?
No, I see that you are at a screen where you can click on the video, but that's as far as I can see.
That's as far as you can go.
Yeah.
Let me stop the share. Let me see if I can get it. That's my only, oh, here it is. No, that's the wrong one. Do you see that video?
No, you're not sharing right now.
Okay, let me get my.
Oh, share sound.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we see it. You have to share sound though.
Okay, so after the Six-Day War, there was a tremendous spike in the population of Israel. There was a renewed interest in moving there. They saw that the Jewish people were, instead of going from a place of annihilation, on the verge of annihilation. Some of the features of that of the Six-Day War, one of the tremendous elements of surprise and cognitive dissonance was that, like, on the one hand, we were preparing, digging mass graves for, like, turning parks into cemeteries, preparing for total destruction. And we went overnight into doubling the size of our land, creating a strategic depth to our land, and kind of putting a feather in our cap, saying we're here to stay. When the nations of the world surrounded us and said we're gonna execute another Holocaust, we were not only fought them off successfully, but also took strategic land that would then keep us safe for years to come. And it wasn't just strategic land that was, and this is a different element. It wasn't like we took their land. We actually, the way that the Jewish people refer to that land is it's called liberated land. The land that is sometimes known as the West Bank. It's the West Bank of the Jordan. It was previously part of the Jewish Empire, which is known as Judea and Samaria. I mean, it goes without saying that the Temple Mount is called the Temple of Solomon, even in the Islamic religion. It's known as the temple that Solomon built. So it obviously belongs to the Jewish people at some point in time. And so the way the Jewish people saw this was that there was a tremendous liberation that took place where um, Jews were now swelling and coming back to this land like never before. There was also a tremendous force of military. They say the joke that in the Six-Day War, every single, like, rocket that Israel would fire was hit its target, and every single rocket that the other side sent was misfired. And they explain, they say, was it a miracle that Israel had an army, or was it the natural thing that somehow God had a hand in this whole thing? It was just beyond comprehension. And today we've come a long way. We have the Iron Dome. Many things have changed, but and we have a military might in the high tech and other things. But at the same time, we still face existential dangers. There's also technology today, 50 years later, 50 plus years later. The technology that's coming out of Israel is kind of shaping the world that as we know it. A lot of the most innovative things that we have are being developed there. Part of that is because Israel has to have a strategic edge in order to survive. When you have to create the most cutting edge, um, software and computers and technology in order just to wake up every morning, then you have that extra, sense of urgency that makes Israel the number one producer of these technologies. Now, the peace that we've had has been throughout the years. We've found some temporary peace, some peace that is maybe not worth the paper it's written on, but the goal is to ultimately to get to a peace that is peace for peace, not a peace for a piece of paper. Um, because unfortunately, what's not changed in 50 years is that there's still, as we know all too well, there's hostility to Israel on many fronts, not just our neighbors in Gaza, but there's also hostility from the north and from also from different places on campus and in academia and in different places where Jews are not made to feel welcome at all because they have a connection to this land. And so really this is an important discussion here is what is our claim to the land? So in general, we look at three claims. We look at the historical perspective, where if you think about there's a place called Bethlehem, and Rachel, the matriarch, is buried there in Bethlehem. If any of you have been there, you'll see it. It's still standing there from the times of the Bible when it mentions it the first time. And we have, if you dig into the earth, you'll see even other artifacts there that are Jewish artifacts. So that's number one. That's one argument for our claim to the land. Just dig in the land and you'll see that there's Jewish artifacts everywhere. There are Jewish monuments everywhere. This is no unquestionably our land. Um, it has our fingerprints all over it, and it's not a coincidence. Now, there's also the international law argument that the Jewish people are here because we were granted permission to be here, that the international community accepted upon itself that this is where the Jewish people should reside after World War II. So that is also an argument that we're going to discuss, and we're going to kind of go pros and cons for each one of the arguments. And the final argument is the Jewish survival argument, the argument about um, after the Holocaust, the Jews need a sovereign space in order that they should be able to protect themselves and not have to rely on the graciousness of host countries that unfortunately did not always treat them so well, and we saw the worst of it in the Holocaust. So these are the three arguments. So let's just first start with the historical argument. Um, his historical evidence of the temple and of different stones that are there inscribed. This is an image of a stone that was found at the Temple Mount site. House of David is inscribed on this artifact. So this is the House of David that goes back thousands of years and predates any other, even the existence of the religions that are sitting on that spot today. But this is something that historically, if you look at as well, from the found at the foot of the Temple Mount, a stone that speaks about the inscription, another stone from another coin that was found under the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount was not touched by Israel, except at a certain point in the I think it was in the year 2000. The Waqf, they started digging underneath it to do some kind of construction, and they were dumping all the dirt from the construction site into a valley somewhere far off in East Jerusalem, partly in the hopes of like removing the Jewish artifacts from the Temple Mount site. But in essence, they did everyone a favor because they unearthed all this ancient history. And I actually participated in this, and it's very fun if you do this with your family. The next time you go to Israel, you can actually take a bucket of dirt and sift through it, and you sift through it with the way that an archaeologist would sift through it, looking for different coins, different pieces of tile, of glass, and they show you all these things in advance of your own expedition, and you'd be surprised what you find, and you can see at the end what the things that they found in this site, and they have it's like a project where they have everybody sift through this material, and they're able to then um, you know, show that this was under that site to begin with. So obviously this was here first. And so here we have the Bar Kokhba revolt. Bar Kokhba was one of the Jewish leaders at the end of the Roman occupation and the destruction of the temple, tried to bring a resurgence of the Jewish autonomy to Jerusalem. It was put down in a bloody massacre, but this was a coin that was minted from that time. So this is the historical argument. Now, does that give us the right to take something back, right? Just because something was, belonged to you, I don't know if you have, maybe when your kids get older, they move out of the house and they say, this was my room, and the younger kid is living in it. It's not your room anymore. Like do the to the countries that used to, occupy our country, there's Mexico and the Ohlone tribe or whatever they're called. Do they have the right to this land just because, are we going to give it back to them just because they were here first? So what if you were here first? And if the Canaanite people come and want to take back the land that we took from them, is that give us the right to, is that make it whoever gets there first, whoever gets there second, that's who gets to have it for eternity? Is that how the world works? Because we also conquered it from others. We conquered it from the Canaanites. So what gives us the right to the land? So this argument, it doesn't necessarily hold so much water. On the one hand, it's a very strong argument, but just because you had it at some point, and even if we can prove that we had the land at that time, it doesn't mean that we deserve it right now. So that's where the international law kind of kicks in. The international argument, there was the Balfour Declaration telling us that mandate for Palestine. They went back to like a biblical mandate, dividing up the land so that the ancient Israelites would have it. Now, here's the question. Why would you want to stake your legitimacy of a land to an entity that can become hostile to you? So the UN gave it to us, and the UN can take it from us. If all our eggs are in the UN's basket, the United Nations that found favor we found favor in their eyes in 1948, but now today in 2024, they want to tell us that this is not our land, and now we're going to accept that. So if we use the argument kind of selectively, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because the world does change its mind, and it has changed its mind, and we can't rely entirely on that argument. So there's also the survival argument. The survival argument is saying, as we said, that the Jewish people need the state of Israel in order to survive. But is that true? Are Jewish people safer in Israel today? I mean, I think a lot of us are scared for our brothers and sisters in Israel, especially after what happened October 7th and before, because we know that there's a lot of neighbors that are extremely hostile and are within striking distance of killing perhaps half of the world's Jewish population right now. So in some sense, if you would have kept Jews scattered throughout or moved Jews to some other far-flung corner of Siberia, we would have been a lot safer. So to be in the Middle East, it's like, or maybe Jews should move back to, we should just make a state in Beverly Hills, where a lot of Jews are, or in Florida. But Israel, it's not the best neighborhood. I could think of better places to put us for our survival's sake. This is a very hostile, rough neighborhood to be in. And not only that, people will argue just because the Nazis took your lives, 6 million of you, it doesn't mean that we should give you our land here in the Middle East. This is Arab land. This is a land that doesn't have anything to do with the conflict that happened in the Holocaust. Well, it did. There was a alliance between um, the axis of evil and the peoples that were living there in that land and controlling the Mufti and Grand Mufti in Jerusalem. But that's a separate question. But still, it can be argued that there's no business, that the Jews have no business surviving and making their safe haven in this strip of land in the Middle East. So these are all three of these arguments. Basically, they have validity to them. There's no question. But on the one hand, if we would put all our eggs in these baskets, we would be really selling ourselves short. So what is the ultimate answer? We have to look to why the land of Israel. Why do we need this land? It puts us in greater danger. It's not something the world wants to give to us in the first place. And even though we had a historical connection there, and even though the United Nations gave it to us, I don't know, last century, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to have it. Many countries, if we look at it, the number of countries that have acquired land through conquest or settlement is tremendous. The Jewish people were the only ones that have had it given to us, but still it's not enough because, like we said, they could take it away from us. So what is the Torah's reason for giving us the land? What is the reason the Torah gives us the land? We start off with a strange verse. This is in the book of Exodus. It speaks about sanctifying the new moon. And this is really what's known as when the Jewish people are leaving Egypt, God commands Moses, he tells the Jewish people that they should sanctify the month and they should make it a new month and follow the lunar cycle to calculate their months. And this is like an interesting commandment, but this is considered one of the first commandments of all the commandments in the Torah. Now, the question that's asked is, why do we not begin the entire Torah from this point in history? Why does it begin with the creation of heaven and earth? If the whole Torah is a book of laws, why do they have to spend so much time giving us the information about like some kind of storybook, things that we never, don't necessarily need. Who says we need to know all these things about Bereshit? In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. Is it really so essential to know? Just start us from the beginning, the very first mitzvah. So what is the reason for giving us this very first mitzvah right now? And but beginning the Torah, two books, many pages earlier, the reason is mentioned in the very opening of the Torah. It says, "Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz." It said, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Why did He do it in the beginning? He was telling us that in the beginning, the entire world belongs to me. That's what God says. It's my world. I created it, and I, as Rashi, the foremost commentator on that verse, says that God is telling us this is who owns this world. God is like producing His title deed to the land and saying, "This is my land. I created the heaven and the earth, and therefore I give it to who I want to give it to. It's not yours just because you stake claim to it. It's yours if I've given it to you." And so Rashi wrote this. The commentator Rashi was a medieval French rabbi, and he lived during the Crusades. And so this was a very controversial statement for him to write in his commentary. He knew that it would be critiqued, and he knew that people were vying for who had control of the Holy Land. And what he was telling people was that it's God's choice. And so this is the argument that I want to propose today is this argument that God created the world and promised Israel to the Jews in countless places throughout the books of the Torah. As we see, the entire story is centered around God speaking to Abraham, promising to his descendants this land. This picture in the background is the cave of the Machpelah in Hebron. Hebron, Jews cannot even walk safely in Hebron right now without an entire military force securing them. I visited there, and you have to travel there in a bulletproof bus. It's hard to imagine that this is the land that Abraham himself purchased full price, and in this land he was told that he would be him and his descendants, because they followed in God's ways, would inherit this land. It's this very land that's being subject to the greatest level of dispute, and it's tends to not be under Jewish sovereignty for most of human history. So there was a covenant, there was a promise to Isaac, promise to Jacob, and there was a promise for the Jewish people in the burning bush, and the story with Moses, that the Jewish people would leave Egypt, and all the mitzvot, all the commandments are dependent on living in the land of Israel, the laws of the sabbatical years, all the laws of the temple, everything. Some of you may have heard that there's 613 mitzvot. But 613 mitzvot is of all of them that can be done, majority of them are no longer in effect because we no longer have the temple, and majority of them, even if we would have the temple, are only relevant in the land of Israel. So all of our Jewish observance is dependent on this land. Now, why did God choose this land? He chose this land, this strip of earth, because it was the axis of where east meets west, where north meets south. It was very much a strategic location for the entire globe. At that time, the civilized world was constantly, if anyone wanted to conquer the world, every major civilization had to cross through this access. This nexus of civilization was known as Israel. And it's for this reason that God wanted there to be a Jewish people there. The Jewish people are not some abstract concept. They were meant to represent the will of God in the physical world here on earth, that they should create a society that should live according to God's will, and by doing that in their own, modeling that for their own society, by extension, by modeling it for themselves in their own lives, when people would pass through there and see the Jewish civilization, they would say, we can do it too. And the entire world would thereby become a model civilization as well, and the entire world would become a garden, so to speak, of God, or an abode for the divine. bringing heaven down to earth. Judaism is not about going to heaven. Judaism is about bringing heaven down to earth. And so having a land of Israel, a physical land, a physical place, a place that is very populous, a place that is very much in the heart and center of everyone's attention, that is the whole purpose of creation, because God has plenty of angels and light up in the heavens, and he has no problem with that. Everything, it's like you don't need to turn on the light when the sun is shining. That's heaven. What we need to turn on a lamp. We need to turn on a light in a dark space. And so God put us the lamp in the darkest space of the planet, in the center of the room, so that everything would become illuminated, and that everything could then not only become illuminated, but it's like a candle where you touch your candle to the other candle, and now you have additional candles that have light as well that can then spread to other candles. And throughout, from touching this candle center point, the entire world is illuminated. So that was really the goal of the Jewish people being placed in this strip of land that is not necessarily the safest place, and is not necessarily the most kind place, and it's not necessarily for our survival in that sense. It's for our purpose. It's for the purpose of bringing heaven down to earth. Now I don't think I'll be able to play the summary video as well because of the sound issue, but I would just want to talk about how this argument, I remember in my early years on campus, so I've been here for like 20 years. I was also a student here on campus, and I did not grow up observant. My mother, like I said, my grandmother was born in Hungary, Czechoslovakia area, and moved to Israel. She did not grow up religious. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. He did not grow up religious after the Holocaust. After the family survived, although they were very religious before the war. After the war, they moved to Israel and did not observe very much. And so for me, I kind of grew up very non-observant and came to observance in Berkeley, of all places, when I was a student in Berkeley in 2000, 2001. And part of I remember advocating for Israel on campus. In those years, it was the same. It was kind of the beginning of 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 what we're seeing today. It was the very beginnings of that kind of spawning. But one of the arguments that never really made sense to me was this argument, like, okay, God said, the Bible says that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. And I used to kind of ridicule it, or people would ridicule it if you would bring it up. They'd say, no, it's the Balfour Declaration, and there's a historical argument, and let's go on archaeological digs, and let's look at all the San Remo Convention, and this and that, and all the different legal arguments. And and Israel also, we invented the internet, or we invented the cell phone. So Israel is a good place. We're a democracy in the Middle East. And now, if you come onto a college campus, you'll see, and we just had a speaker on campus the last 2 nights in a row. These arguments don't fly. They don't fly anymore. You can't say that this land belongs to Israel because we are a Western democracy in the Middle East. That doesn't fly. You can't say we're here because we were here first. They say, no, we were here first. Oh, no, or even if we were here first, you took it from us. And you can't say that the UN gave it to you, or that America gave it to you, or anything, because we reject all those bodies. Those entities are illegal. Those are occupational forces, and we reject all those things. So Jews are realizing that we have to stop using all those other arguments as bargaining chips, or as negotiating tools, because they only serve as serve us sometimes in detriment. They're not wrong arguments, but if we stake our claim on those arguments, sometimes it really does us in, and people are using these arguments sometimes as a shield to also attack us from an anti-Semitic place. They can say, well, I would never say anything about a Jew, but about the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, well, that's an occupational force. That's a place that is illegitimate because it was founded from illegitimate means. And so now Jews are starting, and this I'm seeing, I'm on campus and I'm dealing with, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students that are here facing this for the first time. And they are realizing that when they go on a march on campus, like we just had last week, they said no flags, not because they don't support the flag and the state of Israel, but because they're saying that our enemies are using that flag as a weapon against us, and they're using it as cover to attack us in a way that we've never seen before. And so we need to go to our essence. We need to understand who we really are, that we're not just another, state like all other states in the Middle East and happen to be doing a good thing there. We are the Jewish people. We have this land that was promised to us by God, and the entirety of the world recognizes that book as valid because they have established their own belief system from this book, and so they recognize that. But the one people that hasn't completely embraced that yet is the Jewish people, and until we embrace that, it's going to be very hard for them to embrace it. Why should they embrace our role in that book if we're not embracing that role in that book? And so more and more, um, what I'm seeing is that students on campus and Jews around the world are coming to this realization that it is their Judaism and their connection to this land from a Jewish perspective, from the Bible, from the Torah, that is giving them the deepest and strongest connection to the land of Israel. And this is the greatest tool also in fighting anti-Semitism. Um, you don't have to fight anti-Semitism to know that it's not a pleasant thing to have an identity where the greatest thing about you is that you fight off your enemies. That's not that Jews today, maybe the previous generations, they lived in the shadows of Holocaust survival, and they to them it was never again, and we can't forget. And the state of Israel is there to save us. But today's Jews, when you mention the Holocaust and you talk about the state of Israel, it makes them they're uncomfortable. They don't know what to do. And so what we have to teach them is that our identity is not just a reaction to someone's hate, and our identity is not just um, what someone else labels us. We have to know why we're Jewish and who we really are, and that we are the Jewish people. We're reestablishing the Davidic kingdom, and that this land was given to the descendants of Abraham, not because we are better than anyone else, but because God owns the world, and God decided which nations should live where, and God wanted that this land, this little strip of land, should be the descendants of Abraham. He wanted them to make a small civilization here that would be an exemplary to the rest of the world. It's not to say that other people can't live there. We're happy to have other people live there. There's plenty of coexistence and beautiful coexistence, and that's the whole point of the Jewish people being there, is to show how it's done in the entire world. And by extension, if you could do it with your own, if you could learn to like the people you love, you can also love and like the people that live far away from you, because sometimes it's hardest to love the people that you're closest to. And so this is really the I guess Saul wanted to know the Hasidic approach. When we look at the Torah, when we look at our identity, when we have a God-centric view of our purpose and our mission, that is really what gives us the greatest claim to the land of Israel, and also gives us our greatest claim to our own identity, reclaiming that identity. The moment we embrace that and say we are the Jewish people and that we belong in this land, um, there's nothing anyone will be able to say otherwise, because they recognize and they know that it's true too, because all of their identity is based on that principle as well. And I'll just end with a story that some of you maybe are familiar with. There was one of the founders of the modern state of Israel, David Ben Gurion, was a Jew born in Poland, and there was something called the Peel Commission. There was a Sir Peel, Lord Peel, who was British, one of the British that was assigned to kind of make peace in Israel between the Jews and the Arabs and everyone that was living there at the time, the Christians. And so he was doing like a survey. They were having a court case, a tribunal. They were trying to argue the merits of who belongs here, who doesn't belong here. And so everyone was arguing in their case. And you have the Arab Muslim. He says, I've been living here for 600 years, my family on this land. And then this Ben Gurion stands. He says, I was born in Poland. And he says, you were born in Poland, so what is your title deed to this land? And he said, and David Ben Gurion, who was not a religious man, he was not only not religious, he was hostile to the Jewish religion, I would say, in a lot of ways. but he slammed on the Bible that was sitting on the table. He said, this book that everyone just swore on in this tribunal. This book is my title deed. This book says so. And so ultimately, this is the approach that I wanted to share. I'm not saying that the other arguments are irrelevant and that this argument stands alone on one leg, but I do feel that aside from it being, I think, the ultimate reason of our purpose in this land, it's really also the most politically correct one. It may not sound like it at first glance, but it's something that, of all places in Berkeley, we just witnessed on Monday, a march where people said, "We are Jewish. We're marching as Jews. We are saying that we're here because we are the Jewish people, the land of Israel. Also, that's also, but we're the Jewish people. God created that. God created all types of people. There's the Jewish people. There's the non-Jewish people. It's not a competition one for the other. We're all peoples. We're all families. The way that you become a better friend and colleague is by practicing number one, love yourself, and then love your family. And then when you learn how to love your family, by extension, you can love the whole world. And so the Jewish people are focusing on this as role models to show the entire world that this is how it's done. Love yourself, love your people around you. By extension, you'll be able to love everyone in peace. And I'm open to questions if anyone has any questions. I don't know if I'll be able to show that video. Unfortunately, it's a big file. It's going to take too long, but
That's okay. Do you want to stop your screen share for a second? I wanted to comment on something and I have a question, and there might be some more questions. First of all, thank you so much for your time. This is great. And I think it's so different from our last webinar. It's great. I love the variety, and a lot of people will catch the recording. So here's a question for you. Okay, so if the proof text is the Torah, Pentateuch, the five books of Moses, here's a question. Why even argue at all, right? So you said these are the three arguments. Here's another argument, totally different, right? So with this mindset that we're going to argue with people. So when I envision this in my mind, it's like, well, what's your proof? It's the Torah. Okay, well, that's the end of the argument. So why even argue at all? A. B, is the Hasidic concept more, the Rebbe would say, and I think this came from the Alter Rebbe initially, which is, rather than going through a problem, you just jump over it mentally or actually, right? So talk about that, if that makes sense.
well, I do think you answered question number one with question number two, that it's not an argument. It's this argument is not an argument, and that's why people don't like it, is because it's not, you can't argue with it. It is what it is. It's saying this is who I am, this is who we are, we're saying this is axiomatic to the world. This is God's will. Can you argue with that? I don't know. We can say I don't accept that argument, but it's not really up for debate. It's not a logical argument. It is based in, I mean, we can debate the validity of the Torah and whether or not we should accept it, and that's a different conversation. But I think the majority, I'll tell you, I can't. You can maybe search it. I'm having the technical difficulty, but I was in APAC when we would teach this class from year to year pre-COVID. One of the incentives of the class, as the students that took the 6 weeks of the class, where we would help them with a very generous stipend and take them with us to Washington, D.C. We took 10 students every year to the APAC policy conference. And I remember one of the main sessions, Chuck Schumer. He's a Jew, and he's not known, as you saw today. I don't know if you saw in the news. He's not known to be like the most religious of Jews. You wouldn't think he would say such a thing. And he said, "I'll tell you why there's not peace. It's because God says the land belongs to the Jewish people, and the Palestinians don't want to accept that." And so he like kind of said, he said there would be peace if they would just accept that. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. I think we need to maybe just refer to it a lot more and behave like it a lot more. If we would just be the Jewish people, like you said, the Chatchila Ariber, that was the concept, that when you have an obstacle, there was a Hasidic saying that sometimes you think that I should go around it, I should go under it. But there was one of the Hasidic rabbis of Chabad. He said that when I see an obstacle, I go over it. I just, to begin with, right over the top. I don't reckon with it directly. And I think that's the strategy. It's a very good point, Saul, because That's how we do our Israel advocacy on campus. I'm a rabbi. I'm not here to be a political pundit. I'm not an expert on the San Remo Convention. I don't know. I read them in the book and I can tell it back to you. But I'm not a historian and I can't I'm not an archaeologist and I'm not a strategist and the Holocaust expert, you know. I can tell you though that what's working on the ground, the boots on the ground, is that when you connect to the person's Jewishness, you connect to their identity, their core identity as a Jew, that makes them they don't understand why, but that core of their neshama is activated. It illuminates, it sparks their excitement much more than all these other mind-bending philosophical arguments that you can give them and logical reasoning when you appeal to what's called the pintalayid, like their neshama, yeah, their soul. When you touch their soul, and I think it's the same thing for the entire world. Um, Sometimes these flags get in the way. Everyone's standing up on campus right now. My flag, your flag. We're all people. We're all created in the divine image. We don't need to put a flag and get in each other's way. There's enough space for all of us together, and that's like how we go over. We need to address it from this core point. It's like when my kids, I know you have little kids still, like they fight over a toy and this one says it's mine, and this one says it's mine, and I got it first, and no, I'm stronger, I took it from you. And then you're the parent, and you come and you say, no, it's mine. And we have to realize that our all our lives, our entire life is given to us. The entire world is given to us. Nobody created the world or the earth underneath their feet. Nobody. We didn't even create ourselves. We can't create a single thing. So it was all given to us. So we need to be, instead of saying it's mine, it's mine, it's mine all day long, taking from each other and deciding who's who's stronger and who can use the better logic. We should just say, what was the purpose of this land? Why was it given to us? Is this, like, what am I doing with this thing? Am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And what is required of me in this world and in this land? And honestly, the Jewish people, we don't need the land because of the beach in Tel Aviv. There's good beaches in Florida. So if we're going to be the Jewish people in Israel, then we have business being there, right? Now, I'm not saying we don't have business if we're not going to be that, but definitely our detractors look at us and they say, "You're not the Jewish people. Are you the Jewish people?" So sometimes we need to be a little bit, take a little uh, um, uh, advice from our enemies that are telling us, be more Jewish. You're not. We're saying, yeah, okay, fine. We're Jewish. Yes, we're the Jewish people, and we see the unity in Israel now. When we've been attacked after October 7th, there's a lot less this. It's coming back, but there's a lot less politics, and it's more just a focus on we are the Jewish people, and we're here to stay. And I think ultimately, if you want to hear my opinion on the solution to the whole situation right now, is that the people that are there now that are suffering at the hands of other politicians, there's a lot of innocent people that are suffering. And if the politics of all of this would just go away, and the godliness of everything would be promoted, we would see peace in an instant, and everyone would be happier because Jews and Muslims lived in peace for many, many centuries. And we can do that again very easily. Jews and Christians are doing so today. There's no reason people of all faiths can't live in total peace and harmony. It's politics that's our truest identity. It's the politics that's a superimposed identity that's kind of controlling the whole, and creating this whole mess. And so we just have to go back to our truest self. And this is where it all begins. This is if we would look to this book, yes, I can't prove it to you that this is the right book, but I think a lot of us know that this book is the bestseller for a reason, and we should all look to it a little bit more often and get everyone to accept it. Maybe religion also gets in the way of this book, in the same way that politics gets in the way of and nationalism gets in the way of people getting along. And it religion has, in the name of religion, quote unquote, has done a disservice to relationship between God and his people and the creation. The creator and the creation is what religion is about. But when you turn it into a religion, it becomes a chore and it becomes a burden. It becomes something that people weaponize sometimes. So we have to put all those things aside, take off all the labels, and just focus on, the essence of what we have, and that will keep us together.
I love it. Okay, so I have a couple other quick, and if anyone has a question, you're welcome to type in the chat, or if you want to unmute, just raise your hand or something. That's great.
Hey,
So,
Saul,
oh
I
yeah,
was gonna make
Lewis.
a
Sure, go for
comment.
it.
Did I share? I messaged you.
You just messaged
Um,
me privately, but you can share it with everyone. Yeah.
and yeah, I'll share with everyone. And thanks for inviting me as well. And Rabbi Gil, I appreciate this time as well. I was gonna say I really like the argument that you're pointing back to the Bible as a source. And two comments. One of them is, I relate this to, I'm sure you probably know as well. Like I think it's from First Chronicles 29, where it's stated that everything in the heavens and earth is yours, O Lord. That's kind of God owns everything. And you see now in the United States, there's a huge argument over where do our rights come from, right? And it's obviously comes from God, where we get these inalienable rights that's in our Constitution, and everything. But you have a lot of people claiming that it comes from the government. And just as you said, when you take that position, it creates a whole bunch of chaos. And I totally agree
Exactly.
with you, but in the sense that it's these man-made things that we've created around politics, around religion, that's really getting in the way. But when you go back to the fundamentals, and I try to do this myself, is whenever anything happens, I always kind of look back at, okay, well, what does the Bible say first? Because I think there's answers in all those things. But I think if you look outside of that to politicians, you're in any other man-made thing, that's where you end up with all these issues, because everyone else is biased.
Absolutely. And I would go even
So
further that you said that your rights are not given to you by the government, and they can't be taken from you by the government. But I would say even further than that, we're seeing a lot on campuses that there's been a weaponization of like the rights that we have of free speech and whatnot, and people are
I agree.
misusing it and using it against the people that have given it to them. And that's because inherently, when you have a rights-based society, my rights will interfere with your rights. But
Right.
Judaism, and I think the Bible, you don't see, there's no word for rights in Hebrew. You don't have women's rights. You don't have employees' rights. You have husbands' obligations. You have employers' obligations, employees'
Right.
obligations,
Right.
wives' obligations, responsibilities. So basically, it's rights versus responsibilities. You don't have rights, meaning you do have rights, but I have a responsibility. I go beyond rights. It's like
Right.
we need to go. Democracy was great, but we need to go even more than the democracy. We need to go like to a place that like takes over where democracy fails because the democracy can eat itself alive and say, I don't just have a right, I have a responsibility to also defend your right. Don't stand idly by. No, you're right. Like you have to act. You have a moral obligation. You have a divine obligation, not just moral, not just human, not just man-made, not just government imposed, but you have a divine responsibility into this world to do the right thing. And so when we all start taking care of the responsibility and we look to ourselves and say, what is my responsibility here? Then we don't get in the way. Then we see like the bigger picture instead of seeing my rights conflict with your rights. And then we have world peace. That's
Yeah.
it's pretty simple formula, but when push comes to shove, but that's why we got to start with our own small communities. You start on yourself and you start with your spouse, you start with your family unit, and then by extension, when everyone starts looking at each other like they're brothers and like there's and they actually get along with their brothers, then that's a good thing. That's a good start. So I agree with you 100%.
I love it.
I agree. That was good.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Lewis. Did I catch you off? You good?
No, I was gonna say I totally agree with you, especially about the part about the no rights, but actually more focused on the responsibilities. Because I think the difference is it actually starts to value and appreciate everybody's position. Everyone has value, as opposed to, I think, when you think about rights, it's me versus them, or it becomes antagonistic, as
Exactly.
opposed to having responsibility supporting my neighbor, etc.
Exactly.
Basic biblical principles. Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but I'm really grateful that you mentioned the fact that Jews and Muslims lived in peace for centuries. I was just studying the Iberian Peninsula and the golden age of Spain, they call it, and it's true, right? And it's also nice to hear, and I think like there's some perception out there in the world that, like Jews want to kill all the Palestinians, or we want to like do genocide. Like that is the furthest thing from our ideology. Like we're not a death cult. We're not jihadists, right? That is not, and this was, none of this was pre-scripted. Like Rabbi Leeds is speaking from love, chesed, where we actually want to live in peace. That is our goal. Like that is the end game is we're living in peace. We're, Mashiach comes, we're all living in peace, right? So I think it's
Absolutely.
really good to hear you say that, and for people to hear that as well. Like there's, and also I will mention one other thing, and I'm planning on studying the Quran a little bit more this summer. But Israel is mentioned 43 times, and it's mentioned as the land that God gave the Jews in the Quran.
Right.
So
I,
so there's that, and also it doesn't mean only Jews live in Israel. There's 20% are Arabs, and there's tons of Muslims and Christians, and every report I've heard in the last 3 days, from the IDF starts off by saying Ramadan Mubarak, and there's some other expression too, like wishing all of our friends, happy Ramadan, and that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is open, and we want to make sure you have freedom of religion, right? Which is powerful, and it's a testimony to the end vision, which sometimes it's hard to see from the middle. So I want to
absolutely.
mention that. Anything else in terms of, you mentioned one thing like activating yids, the pental yid, which concept you may need to explain a little bit, but for things, people that are hearing this in the future, for students on college campuses, anything parents can do, anything that you recommend, a couple of tachlis things.
Study the Torah, go to your Chabads, study the Torah, learn what it says, and and go to the source of your Jewish identity, go to the essence of it without um, compromise in, and you'll see that it's gonna it when you build your connection to the land, and you build connection to your life and to your surroundings through that, with that foundation, you'll be able to build a lot higher, stronger, and peacefully. So um, all the good people of the world want this. Like Lewis was saying, I think there's a vocal minority that is making problems. And they get all the attention. And what has to happen is that the people that represent good and light have to want it as bad as the people that represent darkness want it. And we haven't been willing to stand up enough for it. What's happening in the US, what happened in Israel, like you get a few bad apples, spoils the whole crop. And we need to stand up, and sometimes it takes a little bit of challenge, but like we need to stand up and shine our light. It's like a vampire, like there's a blessing that gives to Abraham. It says that those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. Sounds a little harsh, right? But in any case, what is the language it uses? It says, those that curse you will be cursed. It says, mekalalecha aor. It doesn't use the same word. There's like a different word that you can use for curse. One is lekalel, to curse, and another is aor, is also to curse. But why, when it says blessing, it says the same word twice? Mevarechacha avarech. It's the same root of the word. And for when it comes to curses, there's two types of curse. So the answer that I heard right at the time of October 7th, it was right, and we were reading that Torah portion of Abraham, and someone said an incredible explanation. He said that the Jewish people, sometimes, what our job is to do, it's like God is telling Abraham, your descendants, how are they going to curse people? By being light, by doing the right thing. And the evildoers don't like that. Like a vampire doesn't like light. And so to the vampire, light is a curse. But to the rest of the world, it's a blessing. And so it's, how do we curse the vampire? We shine light on it. How do we get rid of the world's problems? We shine light on it. We take away that darkness. And we shouldn't shy away from it and be embarrassed that sometimes there are things that are not correct in the world. And just because the majority of the world, that they look scary or strong or this, we can't, we can't be intimidated by it. We need to stand up tall and proud. And I think all of us, we need to make sure we connect to the light and connect to Berkeley's motto, Fiat Lux over there and the Save Their Gate. That's what it is. It's let there be light. It's from the Bible too. And maybe there needs to be a little bit more light over there and all over, and everyone should bring their light, and we all put in our little place because we're meant to light up the world in different places, in different ways and with our own little light, and everyone will do their part. We'll have a world that's full of light. So l'chaim, to life and to light.
Oh man, thank you so much, Rabbi Leeds. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you've been doing on campus for 20 years. My goodness. And what a
Thank you.
journey. And thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same channel.